Hello everybody. Hello. Thank you for joining us today. Today we're doing Python fundamentals. Live from New York. And I hope more people will join us in a minute. So what we're going to be doing today, we'll talk about Python, why Python is so popular, how you could use Python in real life, where should you start with Python, how you should approach this subject. And my name is Art Yudin, and I'm a Python instructor here at Noble Desktop. Also recently I have issued a couple of books about Python. So first is Building Versatile Mobile Apps with Python and RESTful Technologies. And the other one that actually was issued at the end of last year, Basic Python for Data Management, Finance and Marketing. So basically what we're going to be doing today, we're going to be talking about how you could actually use Python for gathering, manipulating and analyzing data. So that's what we're going to be doing today. Okay, so and of course this will be a really interactive webinar, and here I have chat running, so if you have any questions you could actually ask your questions in our live chat, and then I could actually answer them in real time. All right, so I hope you could see the chart. By the way, I would really appreciate if you could write something there so I could test and see if it actually works, like hi or something. I just want to make sure that I could see your chat because for now it's empty. Really appreciate that. I'm gonna okay, so if you write something there, just test it. And as I said, this will be not just like some kind of theory webinar, but we will actually write some code. All right, so first thing first, Python is very popular. How do you install Python? Hi Jenny, also from New York. So how do you install Python and what Python environment should you use? So to answer that question, first let's go to python.org. So that's official Python documentation page. And the easiest way to start with Python would be just to download Python from here on your computer. However, there is one little problem with that. To run Python on your computer, if you just download it from the python.org, from official website, you would need a bunch of other things such as text editor, so you would need to download that separately. That's not a big deal, I'm just telling you. So that would be another option, to download it separately, and then you'll be writing your code in text editor, compile it as a file and run it with this Python. That would be first option. Another option, and you could just Google this, you could Google Anaconda. And Anaconda is free distribution of Python. It's very popular, especially if you're planning to use Python for data science and data analysis. And let me say a couple of words about Anaconda. So Anaconda is kind of package. So it comes with a bunch of Python extensions. Now, usually people would ask me why Python is so popular, like what would be main advantage of using Python. So besides that Python is truly versatile programming language, Python literally has more than 1 million different extensions. We call them libraries or extensions, and you need these libraries to do a bunch of other things, because there is plain vanilla Python that I just showed you, and there are some extensions or libraries. And with them, you could actually do a bunch of different things. So for example, you could use Python for data analysis. You could use Python for finance, always popular. You could use Python to build games, or you could use Python to, I don't know, like build web applications. And for that, you would need like particular libraries or extensions. And the advantage of Anaconda is that it comes with major packages already included. Because if you download Python from here, you'll get plain vanilla Python, and that's okay. But later you would need to download all those packages separately. And again, nothing wrong with that, but why go step by step while you could get the whole deal if you download and install Anaconda. All right, so that would be another option. Now, like I told you, we're planning to write some code today, and downloading Anaconda might take like a couple of minutes. We don't want to waste our time. So guess what? There is Anaconda in the cloud. There is like really cool solution from Google, and you could Google it right now as we speak because you'll need it later. So it's called Google Colab. Google Colab. I hope you could see my screen. It says colab.research.google. So to use it, you don't need to install anything on your computer. All you need to do is sign in. And that's pretty easy. I guess everybody these days got a Gmail account or some sort of Google login and a password, right? So you could just like log in and you could start right away. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes. to Google Colab. So again, all you have to do is to search for Google Colab. And that's what we're going to be using today. All right. And in the meantime, while maybe you don't have this login and the password yet for Google, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to create one if you don't have one. If you have one, just like sign in. But in the meantime, I want to tell you, because I usually get this question asked, what it will take for me to learn Python to pivot my career, because Python is very, very popular. And even if you're not planning to change jobs, if you're happy with what you do, to kind of advance your career, you still, these days, you still need to have some programming skills. And believe me, that's not rocket science, that's not difficult to learn. And you'll see it today, because I promise by the end of this session, you'll be able to write some Python code today, all right? So what I was saying? So I was saying that even if you're not planning to change jobs, these days you still need to learn some coding skills, because everything is changing. It's not finance anymore, it's fintech. Nobody goes to banks anymore because we all have apps on our cell phones and so on. And it definitely would be beneficial, even if you're not planning to be a web developer, or if you're not even planning to like write Python code all day long. It still would be really, really beneficial to learn some Python, because with Python you could do a bunch of things. So for example, you could gather information from different sources. Such as you could read information from Excel files, from CSV files, even from websites. You could scrape that information with Python, and then you could actually analyze this. So I'm going to give you an example. Today I was teaching a class, and I was teaching how to gather prices and other information from Amazon.com. So for example, if you need to analyze prices and trends on Amazon, so you could gather that information. Or if you're in finance and you want to build your own solution to quickly do fundamental analysis, you could actually gather information from different corporate websites, such as quarterly reports, annual reports, You probably, if you're in finance, you probably heard about the resource Edgar. So you could actually grab information from there using Python, and in a matter of like minutes, crunch those numbers. So you see, you could pretty much gather information from anywhere. Or another example would be you could use Python to gather information from Twitter. You see, now Python is truly a versatile language. Also, there are different extensions, and again, they're called libraries, to build web applications. So if you're planning to build your own app, Python would be the first choice to build a prototype. So again, maybe you're not a web developer, but you don't need too much experience to build a prototype, so you could actually show your project to potential investors. And speaking of web applications, you probably everybody knows Instagram. So guess what? Instagram is powered by Python. All right. So yeah, so sites like that, Spotify, Instagram, NASA uses Python. So Python is very, very popular. And again, you could always Google and see that Python and JavaScript, they usually share that first place in that list. Also, I usually have this question asked, like, but what if I want to change a career? Should I go with Python or some other programming language? And keep in mind that most of the people never programmed anything in their lives, including VCRs. So hopefully for us, we don't use them anymore. I usually give this advice. So there is a website called dice.com, and you probably know there is Indeed. There are a bunch of other job resources and job boards. Guess what? There is dice.com, and this is very popular resource, but this is specific for tech guys. And here you could just type Python, and we could leave this blank and click search jobs. And let's see how many positions they got. You see, they got more than 16,000 jobs that currently on the market that require Python skills. And so Python is in demand. Why? Because it's versatile, it's easy to learn. It's not like rocket science. And believe me, if you practice at least every day for a couple hours a day, then I promise you could actually learn and get proficient with Python in 2-3 months. In 2-3 months, and you'll be ready to start a new career. And of course, if you invest more time, like I would say 8 hours a day, then definitely months and a half would be totally enough to be like really proficient with Python. So Python is easy to learn, and comparing to other languages, I would definitely recommend to begin your programming journey with Python, because comparing to other languages, it's relatively easy. Because there are other languages like C++ or Java, and some of them still popular, but you see, to learn C++, you would need to spend more time than to learn Python. Why? Because syntax much more harder, and it will take more steps and time to learn C++ comparing to Python. So Python relatively easy comparing to other programming languages. All right. And again, let me remind you, if you just join us, so we're going to be using this resource. You could Google Colab, and then if you're here, so you got to go to new, choose new notebook, and then it will open you a brand new notebook. So notebook is just a fancy name for a file. That's just a fancy name for a file. Now we will be using this resource, And here you could just write Python as we speak, and maybe later you could write this on the go. And this resource is kind of mimicking Anaconda that I showed you a couple of minutes ago, and it's already got all these packages. So it's really easy to begin with Google Colab. You don't know anything, you could even do it on the on an iPad or iPhone. iPhone probably maybe not the best choice, but still you could do it. All right, very good. So I hope you're ready to write some Python code, and also what you could do, if you have any questions as we go, please do not hesitate to stop me at any time and just like write your question in our chat, so I'll read it and answer it. All right, so what I'm going to do next, I probably remove my myself from this screen, so we will have more space for writing code. All right, so I'll get back to later. So let me switch myself off. All right, so now you see here we have more place. All right, so a couple of things. First thing first, I know that probably most of you have never coded before, so let me teach you, as I call it, the alphabet of programming from A to Z. Now in programming, and you have to understand this part, that computers usually, I mean not usually, always have two types of memory. There is short-term memory and then there is long-term memory. Usually when you buy a new computer, the price of computer would depend on those two. Now long-term memory, if you want to store something for a long time, then you need to save it either in a database or as a file. And Python, although it's programming language, believe it or not, it runs in a short-term memory. It runs in the short-term memory in RAM memory. So in the short-term memory, when we want to save some information, we need to do something like this. So first thing first, we need to come up with a variable name, let's say X. What is a variable name? It's pretty simple. It's like in the school, there is X, there is Y, they could change values. So randomly picked variable name X, and here using equal sign we could assign a value. All right, so let's do 7. And what just happened here, although it looks like Python code, we need to execute it. So when you use platforms such as Google Colab or when you use Anaconda, you need to execute line by line. So in this case, X is a variable name, I'm assigning value, 7 is a value, all right? So now it looks like code, but we need to run the cell. How would you run the cell? So you see this play button, that's how you could run that cell. So if you click this play button, and of course it takes some milliseconds because we are in the cloud, and now this code, you see this green mark, so now everything is being executed. Now also, if you don't want to do it like this, there is a shortcut, so you could actually use two buttons, Shift and Enter. And by the way, see here I'm writing some stuff, and obviously that doesn't look like Python code. So what we need to do, we need to place this hashtag before this, and now it's pretty much like we're taking notes. So if you want to take notes as we go, and by the way, that would be a good idea, so you could do it like this. So Shift Enter, and if you press them at the same time, so this will also execute the cell. All right, so every time you write code, you would need to execute the cell. So in the next cell, and again, so here we could write the whole thing in one cell, or we could use separate cells. That's not important. All right, you'll see how I do it, and it will make total sense. We could use function print. So function print is just a built-in command, And by the way, speaking of commands, you probably heard sometimes people would call Python batteries included. Why? Because Python comes with a bunch of built-in features that are ready for you to use right away. And here you could Google Python built-in functions. You could Google Python built-in functions, and it will take you to, again, that's official Python documentation. So here, 67, 68 built-in functions, and print is one of the built-in functions. So because it's a built-in function, we could use it right away. All right. So let me show you. Let me get back again. If you want to find this. If you want to find this page, just Google Python built-in functions and it will take you here. So here I'm going to place print and I place here X, and you see what you see, this pop-up screen. It's pretty much Google Colab helping us, and it gives us all this explanation how to use print function, and it gets us definition of that printed function. So again, what it does, don't forget to execute the cell. Again, how do you execute the cell? You press Shift Enter or you press this play button, and the output will be 7. Why? Because X equal 7. So now this variable X, as we say, being defined as 7, or you could rephrase it and you could say that X holds that value, which is 7. All right. So now if you go here and if you want to change it, let's say to 10, then if I run this cell again, it's still 7. Why? We just changed it. So the reason for that is that you would need to rerun that cell. So please keep in mind that every time you make changes to code, you would need to rerun that cell. And here I'm going to run the cell again, and then I'm going to run this cell again, and you see I'm getting 10. All right. Again, if you just join us, we're using Google Colab. You could Google Colab, and that's a resource where you could start writing code right away. You don't need anything. And if you have any questions or you need any help, please don't hesitate to ask me at any time. And here we have chat running. So in our chat, you could actually post your question, and I'll answer it because I'm keeping an eye on that chat. All right. So now let's talk a little bit more about values. So value, this is where it gets interesting. So this value has to be stored as in some kind of container. It has to be stored in Python memory in some kind of container. And those containers, they're called data type. So another buzzword, let me place it here. Let me write it here, data type. And I know that first it sounds like really confusing. What is a data type? So let me explain you what data type is. First, I'm going to give you my definition, and then I'm going to give you official definition. And believe it or not, that data type is a very important concept in any programming language. So no matter what language you're going to be learning, Python or JavaScript or Java or C++ or whatever, you still need to know this concept of data types. All right, so what is a data type? So simple example. So here I have a regular bottle of purified water that you could pretty much buy anywhere. And let's think about it. So water is my value, all right? And the bottle is the container. Now, I don't have it here with me, but I could store the same value in a different type of container, let's say in a cup, or maybe in a glass, right? Or maybe if I'm planning to take a road trip, I could take the same value in a travel mug or something like that. You see? Bunch of different containers, same value. So, and obviously we understand the difference between like a can or a plastic bottle or a cup or a glass, right? So the point I'm trying to make is that that container, so we choose a container based on how we're planning to use this value in the future, right? So for example, if I'm at a coffee shop or if I'm at some kind of restaurant and I'll ask for a water, they would probably bring that value in a glass, not in the bottle or in a different bottle, right? So you see? Or again, if I'm planning to take a road trip, so probably I will take the same value in a different type of container in the bottle or maybe like in a travel mug. So again, based on how I'm planning to use this value in the future, I should choose an appropriate type of container. So the same deal here in programming. Based on how we're planning to use this value, 10, we should choose an appropriate type of container, or we call them data types. Data types. So what is a data type? So data type is just, all right, so first of all, I'm going to type here container just to simplify it, but the official definition goes somewhat like this. Data type is just a data classification, so it's mostly for computers, so that computers would know how we intend to use this data in future. So pretty much based on how you're planning to use this data in future, you should choose an appropriate data type. And you're probably thinking, yeah, that kind of makes sense with water, but what about 10? 10 is a number. So guess what? In Python, there are different numeric data types. So for example, here I'm going to create new data type 2.5. So what's the difference? For us, for humans, this is pretty much the same. 10 and 2.5 are numbers. However, for Python, this would be two different things. So the first one will be stored as an integer. All right, so let me place it here. So in Python, we call them integers. All right, so what is the integer? Integer is a whole number. So any whole number like 10 or million, or even if it's a negative number, minus 10, will be stored as an integer. All right? Now, on the other hand, a number with a decimal point, like 2.5, would be stored as a float. All right? So here we have two options. We could save that value as an integer, so then we gotta use a whole number, or as a float with a decimal point. And again, which one should you use? It depends. It depends how we're planning to use these values in future. So for example, if we suppose I have a bunch of people and I need to split them into two teams, so then I probably should use integers, because I don't want to look stupid and say, hey, like 5.5 people will be in team A and 5.5 people will be in team B, right? So when you talk about people or items, you better use whole numbers. However, on the other hand, if we talk about money, and people always want to be really, really precise about money, then we need to use floats. Because even if I talk about $10 even, you still want to see that 10.0, right? Because that's money we're talking about. And price tag should read like 10.0. All right, so floats, you see? Now, since they're both numeric data types, what we could do here, we could do math. We could take x plus y, and if I run that cell, I'm going to get an error message. Why? Because you see I placed 2.5 and I didn't refresh that cell. So we need to rerun that cell, and now I'm going to run the cell, and you see I'm getting that result 12.5. So if you're taking notes, please write it down, and this is very important in any programming language, that math operations could be done only between numeric data types, integer and integer, float and a float, or you could mix and match integer and a float. And by the way, if we want to store this number 12.5 for a future, because maybe that's some kind of important number for us and we're planning to use it down the road, so then x plus y, this expression should be assigned to a variable name. So let's create a randomly picked variable name total and assign this expression. And if you want to see, so here you could print total. So now this variable name total will store that number here. All right, so you see it will store that number here. And if you're planning on, suppose that's some kind of formula and you want to save that result, so you could save result with the variable name. All right, I hope it makes sense so far. Again, in our chat, you could place your questions and I'll answer them. All right, so if it makes sense, let me show you something else. So here I'm going to open new cell for now. And I'm going to assign as, and here I will use quotes and I use apple. All right. Now, so this apple also as a value, stored as a value, as is a variable name, you see, but this is totally different variable name. Totally different value. This one called a string. So this one called a string. Now, what is a string? In a nutshell, string is just a text. Anything that you wrap in quotes would be stored as a string. All right? And string could be empty, could contain characters or numbers or letters or whatever. And for Python, it's just a bunch of characters here. All right? So apple. And so we could actually add a couple of numbers. And now you see, still a string. So here we could also store these numbers. However, there is one huge difference. If I take 7 and wrap it in quotes and then add 7, so these would be two different data types, completely different data types, because this one is a string, the other one is an integer, and we could visually see that stuff. If I run this cell, I'm gonna get an error message, even if I do it the other way. So let me show you what we're gonna get if we're gonna get the other way. It also will give me a message, right? It's giving me an error. And by the way, if you get an error message, again, so let me switch myself off, so you could see how that stuff works. So, and by the way, when you use Python or any programming language, if you run in error, nothing to worry, because Python here is not trying to judge you, but Python trying to help you, and here usually explains what the problem is. You see, it explains what the problem is. So pretty much it's telling that you cannot use plus operator between integer, because 7 is an integer, whole number, and the string, because although it looks like a number, it's not a number. It's a string, you see? Now that pretty much text. And what I'm trying to do here, it's like literally I'm trying to add apples to oranges, which is not a good idea unless you're trying to make a fruit salad, I guess, right? So you see that part's not working because remember what I just told you a minute ago, math operations are only possible between numeric data types. And 7 in quotes is not a numeric data type, but it's a string, which is, although it looks like a number, as a matter of fact, it's not a number. All right, so that's what's going on here. All right, so how can we fix it? And there are a couple of options how we could fix it. And by the way, let me remind you that here we have built-in functions in Python. And also, if you just join us and you don't know where to find them, so please Google Python built-in functions. And there are two functions that we could use here. So first one is float, this one. And another one that we could also use is integer. It's here, all right? And by the way, if you're really serious about Python, just bookmark this page because you really need to learn all these functions. So again, back here, what I could do, I could actually convert this 7 into an integer. And now you see, we get 14 because 7 is an integer and 7 here is an integer. And now 7 plus 7 obviously going to get us 14. So the point I'm trying to make is that you cannot mix different data types together. And that's a rookie mistake, and I've been teaching Python for what, more than 6 or whatever years. And that usually where the people, like people that just making their first steps in programming, that would be a really common mistake. You cannot mix different data types together. And usually when I get to this point, people would say, hey, that's kind of cool. How would you convert A, B, or C, or Z to an integer? And that's impossible. Only if it looks like a number, only then you could try and convert it to a numeric data type. Another option here is that we could use function float. And if you run this, now we're going to get 14.0 because float always wins. And it will add this 0.0 because now 7 as an integer plus 7 as a float will get you 14.0. All right, that's good. However, there is one more option. Now here what I could do, I could use built-in function str, and I could take the 7 and convert it to a string, to that text. And plus 7, you see what's going to happen. Now 7 as a string plus 7, obviously there is no math involved, it's just concatenating these two strings. I guess I could do something stupid, but nobody's stopping me, I guess. And concatenate another string, apple. You see what's going on? I'm concatenating that apple, and now I got 77 apple. And the point I'm trying to make is that if you really take a closer look here, that in all these three instances, although in all three instances we're using the same plus operator, we're getting different results because these are different data types. And again, if you think of that plastic bottle that I showed you before, now that's a common knowledge. We understand behavior of these different containers. So the same stuff is here. If you wanna really learn programming language, no matter what programming language, Python or anything else, you need to understand data types. And that's pretty much what we're trying to teach here in this school. So usually with beginners, we'll start with data types. And usually I want to make sure that everybody kind of understand that concept because it's a very important concept. And here you might say, yeah, all right, so it kind of makes sense, it's kind of cool, but what is a practical use? How would we use it in real life? And let me show you an example. Of how you could use it in real life. So here, what I'm going to do, we're going to build a tax and tip calculator. Tax and tip calculator. What could be more practical? You go to the to the coffee shop, and at the end of the day they would bring you a check, right? Now, so first thing first, I'm gonna write down what we have here, and then we'll try to solve that problem. So you go out, and at the end of the day they would bring you that check, which is, let's for now keep numbers simple and round, $50. And I'm in New York, and I see that we got more people from New York. And in New York, pretty much as in any other state, you need to pay taxes. And the tax rate in New York, somewhat around 8%. All right? So then you also need to, and let me comment them out. And then, as a good customer, you need to leave a tip, right? So then tip rate will be, I don't know, let's do 20%. 20%, oops, not 30, 20%. So that's what kind of given. So now we want to use Python to write that code. All right, so how we're going to do it? Now, first thing first, you need to have a plan. And we call that plan as pseudocode. So pretty much what is pseudocode? It's a blueprint of what you're planning to do. And usually I would recommend to grab a piece of paper and a pencil and write line by line how we're going to solve it. So here, first thing, what we need to do, we need to define variable names. So how we're going to define variable names? I'm going to start with a check. Now, in our classes here, we also teach best practices, and we usually, as we go through a class, we usually point to some things that you need to remember for your job interview, because obviously down the road, you'll probably want to find a job, let's say as a junior Python developer, and during the job interview, they'll be asking you questions. So usually we explain best practices, how the stuff should be done in real life, and also what you should know to pass that job interview. So speaking of best practices, variable name, you don't want to start your variable name with a capital letter. So don't get me wrong, this would work, but that's not a good practice. So usually you start check with a lowercase c. Now, before we were using X and Y and Z as our variable names. That's terrible practice. I mean, it worked for us for a second, but don't be afraid to use long variable names, because when you get back to your code, it will be really confusing. What you meant by X, what you mean by Y, so use long variable names. So check will be defined as $50. So then, tax rate. If you want to use two words for a variable name in variable name, you need to use underscore, because you cannot use blanks. Otherwise, Python think that you're trying to define two variable names. All right? So this thing called snake case, snake is a snake, and we use underscore, and let's define it as 8%. So then, tip rate will define as 20%. All right? So then what? So then we need to do some math. So what math we're going to do? Now here we need to calculate that tax, because we don't know what the actual dollar amount of a tax. So how are you going to do it? Check times tax rate. You see, pretty easy. Python is really easy. It's pretty much like writing that stuff in English, right? So that tax, then tip, and then what I'm going to do, check times tip rate. And you see, as I type, Google Colab kind of helping me and kind of giving me the options here. So now I know dollar amount for tax and tip. And the last thing I want to do, I want to calculate the total. So total will be what? So total will be check plus tax plus tip. And then we could print, oops, and then on next line we could print total. And if you run it, I'm getting 64. I hope you get the same. So you could write in our chat if everything is working for you, or if you have any questions. Make sure everything in Python is case sensitive. Make sure that if something is not working, make sure that, for example, tax rate would match this tax rate. All right. So make sure everything works fine and everything is working. And you could type me if you got the same number as 64. I'm going to give you a minute. All right. Any questions so far? If you have questions, please type them in our chat. All right, if everything makes sense and you have no questions, then I have a question. What are the chances that check will be exactly $50? Come on, we're in New York, right? So what are the chances? Pretty slim, I guess. So can we make this code more versatile? The answer is yes, we can. So if we go to built-in functions, apparently there is function input. Where is it? Where is it? Where is it? It's here, input. So what input does, it will prompt the user to enter a value. All right, so I see Jenny got problem with the checks not defined. So I bet that, hold on a sec. So the problem is make sure it's all lowercase here. And here you also got the same check. So most of the time when something is not defined, you probably misspelled something, on maybe on this line or that line, you use capital letters. All right, so make sure everything match, and also make sure that you run this play button, all right, and you run that cell. But I think the problem might be with the misspelling, because in some instances you might be accidentally using a capital letter. And if your total is 150, so couple of things, you're a big spender first of all. But otherwise, let's take a look what's going on here. Make sure you got these numbers right. And make sure that here you multiply and check by tax rate. And here you multiply and check by tip rate. And then you just add them together. Please check everything. Did you fix it? Did you fix it? Are you getting 64 as I do here, as I do have here? Okay, I'll take it as a yes. So getting back to, yeah, that always happens. Yeah, you see. So everything in Python is case sensitive, and be careful with that. So here we have function input. So let me show you what it does. So instead of actually using 50 as a hard-coded number, we could actually use input here. By the way, function input has to be assigned to a variable named check. And then here we need to pass some kind of message as a string to a user. Like you could write in quotes as a string, you could write pretty much anything you like. So for example, you could write how much is your meal. All right, something like that. So now if I run this, you see here I have this prompt. You see? And I'm gonna enter, let's say 50, And please make sure that when you enter in something, you hit enter. And you hit enter. All right? And there are good news and then there are bad news. So first of all, input now stored as 50. However, you see here we got this underline and it shows us that here we have a problem. So let me show you what's going on here. So it says that cannot multiply sequence means a string by non-integer type. So, and again, if you're not sure what's going on, so suppose I know that it comes with practice, but pretty much what it tells us that here we cannot multiply that numeric value with a string, because apparently input always returns value as a string. All right? So suppose we didn't know that, so now we need to read this error message. And believe me, if you're brand new to Python programming and it's like really confusing to you, so here they have help. You could actually search Stack Overflow. And somebody already had that problem before. So if you're not sure what's going on, you could always Google it. However, the problem again is that tax rate is a float, it's numeric data type. And input here is a string. And by the way, there is very cool function in Python built-in functions. It's called type. So if you're not sure what data type you're using, you could go here and you could use function print, and you could print check, and then you could use function type to print check again. All right, and if I rerun that cell and enter, let's say 50 again, so it didn't solve my problem, but here you see it tells me that hey, this 50 is a string. So that's exactly the same error I showed you before when I had that 7 as a string plus 7 as an integer. So, and remember, we wrote that down. You cannot do math between different data types. So what we could do, we could actually convert that value to numeric value with the function float that we used before just a minute ago. And let's convert that check. Now here I'm going to print it again. Not that I really need to, and not that it helped me, but I just want to check and just want to show you how that stuff works. Because on this line, check is a string, and on this line, check would be another data type. So if I run it, and if I punch in 50 and hit return, so now you see everything is working, and first my value was a string, then I'm converting it with the function float to 50.0, and in this case float would be an obvious choice because we talk about money and we need to convert it to float. And then everything works. Now when you're done with this, you could actually remove this function type from here because we don't need them. And now you could run it and you could enter any number, let's say $100. Now total is 128. And here you could even squeeze a string and you could say your total is, and then total. Again, I'm going to run it, $100. All right, so your total is 128. So I'm going to give you a minute. Run your code, just make sure everything makes sense. Again, if you have any questions, you could ask me, or if something is not working, you could ask me. I'm going to give you a minute. So now you see it's truly versatile program. So next time you go out and they bring you a check, you could say, just give me a second. You pull out your computer and you say, you know, I got this Python code, so let me run that code to see how much tax and tip should I leave here. All right. So is everything working? Any questions so far? Okay, gonna give you another minute. Let me know if you have questions, and if you're not sure what's going on here, please ask me. But let me go here line by line anyway. So first, what we're doing, we define that variable name check, randomly picked variable name, and we're using function input, and function input is a built-in Python function that takes an input from a user. And here, as a string, you could write pretty much whatever you like. So any message could be passed here to a user. We didn't know that before, but apparently input always returns a string. It always returns a string. So since we cannot do math to strings, we need to convert it to a float. And by the way, like online, pretty much all web apps, they take input as a string. So you have to think about it. So you see here we converted it to numeric data type, and then we have tax rate as 8%, tip rate as 20%, and we're doing pure math. So first we need to calculate dollar amount for a tax, check times tax rate, and then we need to calculate the dollar amount for a tip. So again, plain math, check times tip rate. Then we need to calculate total, check plus tax and tip, and your total is, and whatever total is, it's going to be printed here. And you could also add any kind of message here, like your total is. All right, let me stop right here and ask you if everything is working or anybody needs any help. All right, then I take it as yes, and everything is working. I guess everything's working. All right, so now you see that Python is not that difficult. Python is pretty much like writing everything in English. And the main part, you need to start it on the right foot. So what I mean, you need to learn these basics and fundamentals. And by that I mean like behavior of data types. And that's our specialty. That's what we do here at Noble Desktop. We teach these major, they're not that difficult, but they're very important fundamentals. We're trying to build a foundation, so then it will be much easier to do whatever you like to do with Python. And let me take you to our website. And by the way, here I have prepared an example. We have very popular class called Python for Data Science. So if you're planning to use Python to crunch numbers, there are special libraries such as pandas, and this would be an example of pandas, you see. Now you could store information pretty much like in Excel, but believe it or not, it's more efficient than Excel. It's much faster and more powerful than Excel. But to know how to use pandas, first you need to build this fundament and need to learn how to use those data types. Also with Python you could plot your data easily, and there are a bunch of plots that you could do. And in this example, I'm using Python for Monte Carlo simulation, and usually that statistical technique used in machine learning, in finance, or anywhere you would want to use statistics. And everything is like really easy, and believe me, you will be able to write this code on your own. If you take our class that I teach called Python for data science, and then there is extension Python for machine learning, Python for finance, And you can find all this information if you go to our website, Noble Desktop. And so that's our website, so you'll find more information here. And if you type here Python, you'll see all Python classes that we're running. And I teach most of these Python classes myself. So that's our most popular program, Python for Data Science, where starting from the beginning, from basics, exactly what I just showed you. We'll learn how to start with something simple as a tax and tip calculator and get to that gathering and manipulation part where you could actually gather data from different sources, manipulate that data, and where you could actually run different statistical methods to analyze data. So Python for Data Science is a module and a part of Data Science Certificate, so that's longer program that also includes machine learning. We also have Python Developer Certificate, so pretty much if you're planning to use Python to build web applications, so then that would be your choice. But again, to build web applications, you need to start with the basics, pretty much what I just showed you. And also we have this logical extension, Python FinTech. So if you're in finance and you're crunching numbers and you want to build algo trading solutions, or you're trying to switch from Excel to something more powerful like Python, that would be the part for you. Software engineering, so that's also part of web development. And here you see you learn more tools besides Python like HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. So bottom line, please visit our website, Noble Desktop, and here check this information. And I hope I'll see you in our class. And by the way, I believe next month, keep an eye on our website and on our schedule. We will be doing intro in Python for Data Science. I'll show you how to use that powerful library called pandas. And I'm not talking about these little cute bears that out there like in China. I'm talking about panel data, very powerful Python library for data manipulation and for data analysis. All right, so that's it for today. I hope it was interesting, and I hope you learned something about numeric data types and strings, and the main thing that you cannot mix them, and math operations should be done only with numeric data types. So please write in your comments if you have any questions, or if you like to see something else in our next streams and our next webinars and seminars, and anything that you would like to see later. All right, that's it for today. Thank you very much, and I hope I'll see you in our class.